As we know, J. Robert Oppenheimer was the father of the atomic bomb. He is known for the creation of the most destructive weapons ever made by man, and his life was filled with achievements that would make anyone envious. But do you think his life was perfect? Welcome to Facts and History. Far from it. In fact, in this video, we are going to take a look at one of the greatest burdens Oppenheimer had to carry throughout his life. It was so heavy that even he, who had seen the birth of an atomic age, was unable to bear it, and that burden was guilt. Let's find out more about it. J. Robert Oppenheimer was born in New York City on April 22, 1904. His father, Julius Oppenheimer, was a wealthy businessman, and his mother, Ella Friedman Oppenheimer, was a homemaker. Growing up, he had every luxury imaginable, yet he always felt a deep sense of dissatisfaction. When he was only 11 years old, his family moved to Manhattan, and his father bought him a chemistry set, which he used to perform experiments. And that was when he first became interested in science. While other kids his age were playing baseball, young Robert was mixing chemicals in his room, oblivious to everything around him. By the time he was 14, he had developed an aptitude for chemistry and physics, so it came as no surprise to anyone when he graduated summa cum laude in chemistry from Harvard University in 1925. After graduating, he joined the California Institute of Technology to pursue research under the supervision of Nobel laureate Theodore William Richards. There, he shifted his focus from chemistry to physics. After completing his PhD in 1927, he became an instructor at the university, but his career took off when he was invited by the British government to join the team at Cambridge, working on nuclear fission. It was there that he met some of the brightest minds in the world of science, such as Paul Dirac, C.S. Wu, and others. He worked there until 1939, but with the outbreak of World War II, he returned to America. That same year, he was appointed director of the metallurgical laboratory at the University of Chicago to lead the effort to build the first nuclear reactor. On December 2, 1942, the first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction was achieved in a test reactor under the stands of the football stadium. Although not the first nuclear reactor, it was the first of its kind to produce enough power to supply the needs of a city. Thus began the atomic age. The news of the successful test reached President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who congratulated him for achieving what many believed to be impossible. This was the beginning of Oppenheimer's journey into glory. He went on to become chairman of the General Advisory Committee of the Atomic Energy Commission, where he played a key role in developing the first atomic bombs. On July 16, 1945, the Trinity test was conducted in New Mexico, which successfully demonstrated the feasibility of an atomic weapon. And less than 2 months later, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, which led to the end of the war. For his contributions, Oppenheimer received several awards, including the Enrico Fermi Award and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Oppenheimer had achieved everything he could have possibly dreamed of. He was famous and influential. He had access to the most advanced technology, and the brightest minds in the world of science were eager to work under him. He was living the dream. But despite all this, he couldn't shake off a feeling that he was carrying a huge burden, the burden of guilt. But why did he feel guilty? He had done nothing wrong. Well, he himself said, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Here's why. In the early days of the Manhattan Project, the scientists were hopeful that the development of an atomic weapon would be a great achievement. They believed that once the war was over, they would be able to return to their normal lives, leaving the dangerous aspects of the project to the military. But as the project progressed, the scientists realized the destructive power of the weapon they were creating. And when the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the full weight of what they had created hit them. The images of the devastation caused by the bombs haunted them day and night. Oppenheimer was deeply affected by the loss of life and destruction caused by the weapons he had helped to create. Even though he had not been directly involved in the decision to use the bombs, he felt responsible for the consequences. In fact, he said, "I never doubted not only that we would build the bomb, but also that we were right in building it. I never saw any evidence that the bomb was used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki for any purpose other than to end the war as quickly as possible. But I never forgot that what I had done had hurt people very much." Another reason for his guilt was that he had been a part of the military-industrial complex that had profited from the war. Despite his pacifist beliefs, he had helped to develop weapons that had been used to kill thousands upon thousands of people. He had been complicit in the suffering of others. Carrying this burden took a toll on his mental health. He suffered from depression and anxiety, and he began to question his purpose in life. He said, "We knew the world would not end, but we did not know that it would be changed. We knew the danger was great, but we did not know how great. What was to be done? First, to keep the full force of the new force, we had found a secret between four walls and a high fence. Then to decide whether to dedicate our resources to winning a war or to finding another way." But while he was able to keep his personal feelings in check most of the time, his actions didn't go unnoticed by the US government. After the war, he became a target of McCarthy's anti-communist crusade. Despite having no ties to the Communist Party, he was accused of being a security risk because of his past associations with left-leaning individuals, and in 1954, his security clearance was revoked after a controversial hearing. This was a major blow to him, as it effectively ended his career in the field he had dedicated his life to. To make matters worse, he was prohibited from discussing his work openly, which only added to his frustration and sense of helplessness. However, he did not let this setback define him. Instead, he turned his attention to teaching and mentoring young scientists at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. Despite his past, he was still highly respected in the scientific community and was able to secure funding for research projects through private channels. However, this did not completely alleviate his guilt. One of the major reasons for his guilt was that he had been involved in the development of hydrogen bombs, which were much more powerful than the atomic bombs that had been dropped on Japan. He had worked on the design of the hydrogen bomb while he was the director of the Institute for Advanced Study. Despite his opposition to the development of such weapons, he had been persuaded by his colleagues that it was necessary to prevent the Soviet Union from developing them first. He had argued that if the United States did not develop the hydrogen bomb, then the Soviets would, and that would pose a threat to national security. However, he had been proven right, as the Soviets did develop the weapon and even threatened to use it during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Another reason for his guilt was that he had been involved in the development of nuclear weapons for use in Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, the United States had used nuclear weapons in Vietnam, despite the Geneva Convention prohibiting such use. Oppenheimer had been a member of the General Advisory Committee of the Atomic Energy Commission, which had advised against the use of nuclear weapons in Vietnam. However, he had not been able to prevent the United States government from using them. He had felt that he had a responsibility to speak out against the use of nuclear weapons in Vietnam, but he had been afraid of the consequences. He had feared that if he spoke out, he would be branded a traitor and that his security clearance would be revoked. As a result, he had remained silent and had not spoken out against the use of nuclear weapons in Vietnam until near the end of the war. Despite his many accomplishments and the respect of his peers, Oppenheimer was haunted by the knowledge of the destructive power he had helped to unleash on the world. In 1967, he died of throat cancer at the age of 62, but before his death, he had expressed his regret over his involvement in the development of nuclear weapons. In a letter to the New York Times, he wrote, "I never tried to conceal what I thought. I said again and again that the H-bomb should not be developed. I tried to dissuade President Truman from making the fateful decision to proceed with it. I opposed it on military grounds, on ethical grounds, and on grounds of international law. My opposition was overruled, and the H-bomb was developed." Oppenheimer had carried the burden of his guilt for many years, but ultimately he had come to terms with it. He had tried to do the right thing, but in the end, he had been unable to prevent the development of the most destructive weapons ever known to mankind.